sort of thing. But the thing that was outstanding in that station in Busan, I'll never forget it, little children they were just covered in filth, were in rags. They had no shoes on their feet. All they had was little short pants that at best would reach to the knees, but there was holes all through them, and a little skimpy cotton jacket. Now, Korea at night is damp and it's cold. And these little things, they would get a bucket that you would have fruit in, the large can, like the large coffee cans and stuff like that, and they would put a wire through it, and they would come along the coach, outside of the coaches, where the troops were just fed, and they would throw out apple cores, and if you had an orange, you peeled it and you flung the skins outside in the track out the window. The kids gathered these orange skins and apple cores and things like that and put it in their little bucket, and that was what they were going to eat that day. And it was fantastic. And it seems like that you never, ever forget. And anyway, once we were doing that, I can remember the military police, the American military police. And those guys there are really, I mean, they are special pick because they are huge in size. He came in there and said, "This crap is going to stop right now." And Clu Crawford, one of our corporals, got up. Then he said, "I got 10 rounds here that says I can do what I want." And that fella back down right now because Clu was real white around the lips with anger that somebody would have the audacity to try and stop us from feeding little children. We were feeling real bad when we looked out because we were comfortable, properly clothed, and here are these little children, some was 6, 5, 4 years old, running around with bare feet over gravel and cinders and what have you. So anyway, the guy said, "Well," he said, "take it easy there, Corporal." He said, "The reason I'm saying this is," he said, "I have to work here every day." And he said, "When you pick up children who have had their legs cut off because the train has run over them, or they've had their arm cut off," he said, "you'll see where I'm coming from." He said, "But you're encouraging these children to come out." He said, "They will be taken care of." But he said, "You're encouraging them by doing this thing out the window." Then Clu Crawford sat down, and we all kind of sat back. Now, we're coming in the combat zone, and there's a whole lot of different things take place in your life, and they got to change from one lifestyle to a very violent one on the other hand, sort of thing. And that was all part of the transition. So anyway, we pulled out of there overnight, and then we got to a B echelon, and I can't remember the part of Korea that it was in now. I just know it was up in the Kansas line, but there's a name for it. Anyway, we were up in there, and we filed in, and we set up little tents, pup tents sort of thing, and we got a couple of blankets, and we slept on the ground that night. Very, very cold. You didn't get to sleep very much because the cold just kind of soaked right into you. But anyway, the next day I was called up, and they said I'd be going up to A Company, and the driver would pick me up to get my kit together. And I did. I ended up going across the Imjim River, and eventually I ended up at Camouflage Hill, which is a deadly area, and over to A Company, and Sergeant Stone met me, and you know, introduced me to the company at that time. We were at the very sharp end at the front. The front, you couldn't get any closer to the front than that sort of thing. And anyway, that's where I spent quite a bit of time up around Christmas, and I had occasion where I had to throw a grenade, and when I threw it, my arm dislocated. It was an old injury from the parachuting days, whereby I had a very, very hard landing on frozen ground, and it popped my shoulder out. And although it was fixed up at the hospital and so on and so forth, however, once you have a dislocation, it will come out at the most inopportune times. And that was a very bad time, because I'm on this side of the barbed wire, I'm throwing a grenade sort of thing, and the ball of my arm, my right arm, is now down in my armpit. And it's my right arm, so I can't even pick my rifle up. So I'm in bad shape here. But anyway, I eventually got to see a medic, and by that time, the muscles, I had waited so long before I could get to a medic that the muscles had seized up and wouldn't allow the medic to pop the arm back in the socket, because the muscles just clamped down, you can't do it. So anyway, they brought me back to the aid station, which is just behind the front lines, and the doctor tried to pop it in. They even gave me SRD rum. They thought that would numb the pain, sort of thing. And a big strapping corporal held me down while the doctor was swinging on my arm, trying to pull the arm up out of the armpit and set it into the socket. But as I say, the shoulder muscles are quite large, and they just wouldn't allow that. So anyway, they just put it in a sling, put me in an ambulance, and sent me down to NORMASH. You've seen the MASH program on TV. Well, I ended up at Norwegian MASH, sort of thing, run by, well, of course, there was American doctors, Canadian doctors, and everything else. But anyway, the one thing there, the doctor came out and he said, "What do we got here?" And I said, I dislocated my shoulder, Doc. I said, "If you pop it in," I said, "I should be able to get back in the lines real quick." He said, "I'll determine when you go and where you go and so on." Oh, yeah, okay. So I said, "Have you got any weapons?" I said, "No, sir, I do not." Well, I had a .45 in my winter jacket. You know, it's a nylon winter jacket, and it had huge pockets in it, but it was a stripped down .45. I had all the guts and everything else out in my pocket, and to me that wasn't a weapon, see? So I told him, "No, I don't want to." So when I got up in the you've got to walk to the operating room yourself, you see. And he said, "Okay, jump up on the table here." And he said, "We'll set that shoulder." So when I jumped up, that .45 hit on the metal operating table, went clunk. And he said, "All right." He said, "What do you got in your pocket, soldier?" This was the doctor. And I said, "It's a .45, but it's not a weapon, sir." I said, it's dismantled. It's all in part." He said, "I couldn't care less." He said, "Haul it out here." So I had to give him all the guts and springs, and oh, geez. He said, "Do you know how many of these .45s are missing from our stores here in Korea?" And I said, "Well, I have no idea." He said, "Well," I said, "I paid $30 for that one." He said, "I just forget." He said, "About 150,000 of them." And he says, "You got one of them." So anyway, they took that, knocked me out, set my shoulder, put me on a plane, the Dakota. They had the runway open down at Seoul at this time. The engineers had been in and fixed up the runway. So it was an Australian outfit that flew us into Japan, the wounded and the injured. And I was flown into Curie, Japan, to the hospital there, And I got there Christmas Eve, 51. And it was kind of like a rain, snow falling at that time. I was on a stretcher, and there was the Salvation Army standing out on the steps of this here old hospital, handing out what we call ditty bags. They were a cloth cotton bag about a foot long and about 8 inches wide with a drawstring. And then there was a pair of clean wool socks, which I hadn't seen in weeks. There was a razor, a bar of soap, a small package of cigarettes, because everybody smoked in them days, and a package of gum, and things like this. And they come over and they said things like, "Merry Christmas, soldier. God bless." Well, I've been through quite a bit, but that brought tears to my eyes, you know, because that was a wonderful thing. But the next thing I noticed was there was no Red Cross, but the Sally Ann was there, and I'll never forget it. So whenever I get an opportunity to drop something into their drum, the Sally Ann, I make sure, and my wife and all my kids, drop stuff into their drums all the time, sort of thing. And throughout the year, we send them checks to help people, because they are one organization that I have a lot of respect for. Anyway, after I had been in there for, oh heavens, I don't know, I forget now, time has a fashion that kind of makes you forget a lot of the detail of things. But anyway, I believe I was in 4 or 5 days at that time, and I was released back to a garrison a few miles away, and they put me in stores there, giving out blankets to soldiers who were coming from hospitals, coming back from whatever job they were given to do, that were in waiting to get transitioned back to Korea.
So Harry, can you tell us about what some of your duties were in garrison?
Yes, in garrison, of course, we had Japanese ladies who did the laundry of, you know, of sheets and pillows and shirts and so on and so forth. And of course, they required cleaning materials and so on. Now then, they weren't just given a great big pile of cleaning materials. Each day, they had to go through the stores to get their Bon Ami, Dutch cleanser, soap suds, whatever, to do their job, sort of thing. So they just come in with a requisite that was given to them, and I gave them the stuff. And it was the same when soldiers come in who just got out of hospital. They needed blankets, pillows, pillow slips, sheets, etc. So I issued those things, and that was pretty well what my duties were. There was it was light duties where I didn't have to use my shoulder too much. And anyway, I guess I had that job for 3 weeks maybe, and the sergeant major came over and he said, "Would you be interested in instructing?" And I said, "Well, instructing what?" And he said, "Well, we need instructors up at Nippon-Bara, which was an old Japanese army training garrison, training ground and garrison, and it's been taken over by the forces, and people who have been wounded or hospitalized, because we had malaria and stuff like that. You know, going to the hospital, you just hadn't been wounded. It was all kinds of terrible things you had happen to you there." And anyway, and I said, "Yeah, that'd be great." He said, "Because what we have to do is get the fellows sharpened up again. Many of them have been laying around for 2-3 months out of the line. Now you're going back, and you've got to be real super sharp in what you're doing, and get back in the proper swing of things again." So that's where I ended up in Nippon-Bara, with a sergeant, and on one occasion there was a lull in our training. We had trained up a bunch of chaps, and they had been shipped out. Now the sergeant and I had some time on our hands, and before we know it, a sergeant major from the Royal Marine Commando come to our tent and said, he introduced himself and asked if we were the instructors, and we said yes, and he said, our ship has just landed, and I understand that you fellows can train my men on the use of the 3.5 rocket launcher. Well, we said, oh, yeah, no problem there. And he said, when do you want us and where do you want us? So we took him outside and showed him exactly where we'd be all set up, ready to go, and what time. And of course, as you know, the commandos, they were there 10 minutes ahead of time, sort of thing. And we got right into it. The sergeant got into it, telling them all about the weapon itself and the rocket round and so on. And I was there to show them the actual drill. 2 men to operate this here weapon. And anyway, and of course we grabbed 2 of our fellows, privates, and had one as the actual chap carrying the weapon on his shoulder, and the loader, actually putting the round in the rocket launcher, affixing the wires, etc., etc. So anyway, they got a demonstration then of how to hold the body position, the position of the head at all times, and the hand on top of the head, away from the trigger, and the loader, how to remove the bombs, etc., etc. So anyway, it went off superbly. So anyway, the sergeant major said, and he called one Marine down. He was just a young fellow, and just terrified. He probably was an apprentice type, because like I say, he wasn't 20 or 30 years of age or anything like that. He was real young. Anyway, he was the one that was going to do the firing. And I was going to do the bomb loading on the first one. And behind the rocket launcher, we set up a bunch of square tin cans like you got tea from India. They were about, 14, 16 inches square sort of thing, and about 18 inches high. So we set these up. We had about 10 on the bottom, and then the next row we had 8, and then above that 6, and above that 4. And this directly behind the weapon, because it's a back blast area. When you fire an artillery shell, for example, the cordite and the burning gases and that go out the front of the barrel with the projectile. With a rocket launcher, the only thing going out the front is the projectile. The force of the rocket launch is shooting out the back. And we wanted to show them how a person has to say, before he gives the order to fire, check the back blast area. You wouldn't want some clown walking through that's got his head in the sky or not paying attention, because it will kill you and burn you and so on. So anyway, when we explained it, so I had a row of Marines here and a row here, and some of them up fairly close to me, but none of them wanted to get too close. So anyway, we said, now when we fire this round, we want you to be looking to the rear towards those cans, so that you get an idea of how far back it is dangerous in this here back blast area. So anyway, we had this young kid on there. God, he was just vibrating. I guess in his mind, he had this barrel up next to his head, and I'm loading a bomb next to his head. And he probably had never fired anything heavier than his rifle in his life. Well, it was something else. It was so bad that his sergeant major come over and knelt down beside him. And those Marines are something else, I'll tell you. They're a grand bunch. He said, "Now, son," he said, "you calm down now." He very gently spoke to him. He did not speak in a loud voice so that he would be embarrassing him to the troops standing there. I heard it because I was about a foot from his mouth. He said, you're doing all right. He said, "Just calm down. To pay attention to the corporal here and the sergeant." He said, "You'll be all right." "Okay," he said, "I'm leaving you now." He said, "You settle down now." Anyway, my sergeant said, "Gunner, put your hand on top of your head." He put his hand up here. Normally you hold it with your left hand, and your right hand is on a pistol grip with your finger on the trigger. Okay, well, now to ensure that you do not squeeze that until the proper time, you carry your hand up on top of your head. This is a safety feature. Anyway, the sergeant said, "Load." And I picked up a bomb, and everything I did in slow motion, do it out sort of thing. Pulled the wires off. There's 2 wires back in the tail, and that are part of the motor for this bomb. Inserted it into the weapon, hit it with the heel of my hand to make sure it was home, and grabbed the 2 wires and put them on the electrical posts on the after end on the left-hand side of the 3.5 rocket launcher. Well, I spoke to the kid myself. I said, "No, don't get tense now." I said, "It's not going to hurt you, and there's no severe recoil, anything like that." So I said, "Just relax, nice and easy. This is a wonderful weapon." Well, I said, "Now take an aim across the valley at the side of that hill there. You'll see that the it's all broken away. It's all sand and that in about an area about 50 feet wide and about 100 feet high. And up above it was a trail. This is a huge training area, as you can well imagine. And there was an Australian unit marching single file along this top trail. They were going to a particular training area, obviously. And this kid was going to be firing into the base of that hill, into the sand. However, it didn't happen that way. And accidents do happen. And anyway, the kid, I don't know where he was looking, but I guess he just said, "To hell with this, I'm going to squeeze this and get it over with." The barrel was slightly elevated, and you don't have to have it much. Slightly elevated, and he squeezed the trigger on the word of command, "Fire." He brought his hand down on his head, grabbed the trigger, and wham, wham. The back blast area proved our point. All of a sudden, there was the horrendous smack of the blast hitting those tin cans, and they were flying in the air and flying to the rear and everything else. And to show them the danger of the back blast area. In the meantime, the young fellow squeezed off this round, and it's in the air, and instead of going to the base of this here sand pit, it hit up near the top where the Australians were walking through, and knocked 3 of them down. We heard later 1 died, and the other 2 had slight injuries, sort of thing. So that was the end of that day. Of course, it ended up, in utter chaos, so on and so forth. But anyway, we had done all the proper procedures. It was the young Marine that, and he'd probably feel bad about it the rest of his life. But that was how that day ended up there. It was the type of training that we were on call to give, just off the top of your head. You don't get much time to prepare or anything like that. They just ask you, will you do it? And of course, you're going to do it. So anyway, that's what we did at Nippon Barra. Anyway, we're now called back to base, and we are told we are now returning to Korea. And of course, back on the train, back out to the coast, we get our old rice mac back again, across the Sea of Japan to Busan and up into the line. I ended up in A echelon. And my sergeant ended up going to C company up in the lines. Now I got sent over to A echelon to take over. You see, there was a lot of the special forces fellows were pulling out of the line because as 2 PPCLI came, you were relieving the fellows from the 2nd Battalion that were in the line as special forces. They were now coming back into a holding area in A echelon. And that's where the Brigadier Rockingham and several high-ranking people were situated. And Rocky, the Brigadier, had a piper that he brought from Ottawa with him, who was a Second World War man. I believe he was from the Cape Breton Highlanders. And wherever Rocky went, of course, his piper went with him. And both Rocky and his piper were quite heavy into the drink. And anyway, my job was to form up the quarter guard at the battalion emblem in the center of the garrison. And of course, the piper, he was standing aft of the troops. You have a single line of troops with their rifles, and you carry out the quarter guard ritual for lowering the flag at the end of the military day, sort of thing. And as the flag was coming down, the piper, he breaks out into the lament, or one of many pieces of music. Well, this particular night, he had been into the grog prior to coming down to the lowering of the flag. And I didn't realize that he had been into the stuff. And he was standing back of us, and I had my duties to perform, and I wasn't paying any attention to him. I had my own things to worry about. So anyway, we're lowering, the order comes, and we're lowering, the man is lowering the flag down very slowly, a little bit. And the piper breaks in with "Good Night, Irene." Well, I didn't know what the hell to do. And what could I do? And then after 4 or 5 bars of that, he flopped right over on his back. And then the old pipes went, and that's when I gave my troops the orders to get out of there and left him to his own desires there on the ground. So I think we never did see that piper ever again after that. I think he went back to Ottawa probably that night, or the next morning anyway, once he got sober. But anyway, that was another one of the funny things that happened along the way. So I got sick of that job after a couple of weeks because all I was, you know, we had work details, and I had to detail men to go out and stop gravel Americans, you see. The engineers were racing up and down the road outside, and I had details that were out along the edge of the road, and we had to slow them down because they would drive like crazy up and down these roads, and the dust was, you could hardly see through it. So anyway, I had to mount guards and get work details going, and that wasn't my line of work, really. Now, there is some people who like that sort of thing, but not me. So anyway, I went and spoke to a captain in the RCR, and he was an admin officer, and I told him, I said, I want to get back to my battalion, sir, and get the hell away from here. I said, I'm sick to death of this. So anyway, we had quite a long talk. He asked me what I did before I got in the Army, and I told him about sailing on the Great Lakes, and he had sailed as a young man on the Great Lakes. So we were asking about different companies and ships and so on, and the next day I was off back to my battalion, but this time I wasn't in A company any longer. I was now in C company. And of course, right at the sharp end of the front line sort of thing. So anyway, I got put into a platoon where our lieutenant there was a Second World War veteran, and he was also a ranger. sort of thing. So he was a very experienced officer, and it was a delight working for him. But anyway, one of the tasks I was given there, along with my regular duties, of course, I had to take my section along the path. They thought that perhaps the Chinese were sending probing patrols along our flanks. And there was a bunch of scrub brush and short trees and things of this nature along these here little gullies and that they could, and they are excellent soldiers, I might also add right here. They are superb at movement and camouflage. I defy you, if one's out in front of you, he'll be looking you right in the eye and you won't even know he's there. They are that good. So anyway, my job was to take the section and place them in this here copse of trees beside a trail. And we were a listening patrol. We're under no, we were given the order, there would be no combat unless you were fired on first. So anyway, we got down to the copse, and I placed my men in the various places that I thought that would be, you know, where people might come up from the valley up and through re-entrance and so on. And sure enough, the one chap there, I can still remember him, Howard from Ottawa. He had a Thompson submachine gun. So we had all kinds of weapons. But anyway, he was about 2 feet off a little footpath. And lo and behold, this Chinese soldier, we heard them. The officer was, or patrol leader, was talking in Chinese, of course, and giving orders. So we knew that they were all around us. We were surrounded by them, but nobody panicked, thank goodness. And anyway, one come along the trail, and he stopped right at Howard's position there. And if he only knew it, Howard, the end of his Thompson was about a foot from his armpit. And Howard had been in action quite a bit, so he was sweating bullets, but he didn't squeeze off, thank God. So the guy, he didn't see anything, so he very quietly walked back down the path he'd come and went down the hill, and the patrol moved off, sort of thing. So you got your scary moments, sort of thing, and very likely, I only had about 7 men. He probably had a platoon strength, so we would have had quite a pitched battle had Howard ever squeezed off on that chap on the walk. But anyway, and then within the next few days, Sergeant Buxton was out in a feature out in front of C Company. It was out, maybe 300 yards out from the actual company line, sort of thing. And he had a full platoon out there. And he had been there for some weeks, so he got it well prepared. And he had the pioneers set a drum of gasoline, for example, on the ground. And it was partially, about half the drum was in the ground. The other half was covered with twigs and grass and, camouflage like that. And where he put it was a little re-entrant coming up from the bottom of the valley, because you see we all worked in the mountains there in the hills. And and that would be a good place if you were using the ground to make your moves, sort of thing, to come up this little thing. And he thought, if I come under fire, and I'm fired to the front, and these guys come up around behind me, I'd better have some kind of defense. So he had the pioneers set up a charge on this gasoline tank. And that's exactly what happened. When he did come under attack, it was a full frontal attack, and they were all over him, like hair in a dog's back. And Buxton, he got a DCM for outstanding bravery. He was walking along right out in amongst the fire, and he was a weapons nut, so to speak. He had written to the States and had Browning make him up a special shotgun for close-in fighting sort of thing, and he had himself a grand rifle that he kept immaculate. And him and a signer come out of the bunker once they're under fire. His section was really doing well, and excuse me, and I remember he was shooting the enemy, and he said, God, he said, this is better than duck hunting. He said, there's more of them, sort of thing, talking about the enemy. And his signer said, watch out behind you in the bunker roof. And the signer, who had a Sten gun, turned and fired from the hip and killed the guy that was all ready to shoot Buxton in the back. So it was pretty intense, and his lines of communication got cut with shrapnel. It was telephone lines, and the signaler and a group of about 3 or 4 guys were trying to get out to him with ammunition. When they got through the barbed wire and started to walk, a lone gunner, Chinese, come out with his Burt gun and killed the Bailey. He almost cut him in half, sort of thing, and and that was the end of the Chinaman too, because it was nothing but lead flying for him, but he didn't care. So anyway, Buxton knew that we couldn't get out to him, but the next morning we went out and we seen the guy that took the Burt gun off him and so on, and finally got the communications set up. And wouldn't you know it, when you're out there, the jet planes, the Sabre coming over to take out the Chinese with napalm and so on, they didn't know where the lines began and where they started. They didn't know where the Brits or the Canadians or the Americans were and where the Chinese were. So you had to lay out these color panels, red over green or blue over the red or something like this. And they were held down with stones. Well, during the fighting, artillery shells are coming in and they blew the bloody banners away. So the fellows from the aircraft carrier come over, and those, what are they have the bent wings?
Corsairs?
Corsairs came over, and they napalmed Buxton there. And I know Ben Woolley had his equipment burned, and grenades were going off, and guys got burnt, and it was a mess.
Did you actually see that, Harry? Did
Yes.
you see the Corsairs come in?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I had a machine gun on him, and I was just all ready to squeeze off, because at that time he was at his low point. He was just ideal for me to nail him. When my platoon commander grabbed the barrel of my Bren gun and said, don't. And I let that guy go, but gee, I was just livid. As you can well imagine, they just went through hell all night. And here they are being bombed by the Americans. Geez.
About how far away would it be, like over 100 meters, or how far away would you be from Buxton's position at that time?
About 300 yards, roughly around there.
Yeah.
More or less, sort of thing. Sort of thing, you know, it's dog legs out there, sort of thing. Everybody was out in front. And the whole idea was, of course, if they attacked in mass, they had to go through Buxton. And of course, the rest of the company would be all set up, you know, with your machine guns and everything else. And you're also be on the radio to your artillery to let them know that to get ready for a fire job, so to say. And anyway, that's the way that one went off. And
did you do any other types of patrols, like either before or
oh,
after?
yeah, every patrol that was ever invented we were on, because that's what we did. 2 PPCLI did mostly attacking, you know. They started back here, and they took this hill, and they conquered it, and then they took the next hill and the next valley, and they did the heavy work. And that's where they got at Cap Young. You remember Cap Young was an outstanding battle. that held the Chinese army back, and the Aussies stayed as they always do, like Canadians. You put them in a position, they stay. Anyway, the Aussies were, they were decimated before the remainder moved back a few hundred yards to take up another fire position. The Kiwis covered them with 25-pounder fire.
But you told me one time about the weapons, the variety of weapons that you used. Could you just comment on some of the variety of weapons?
Yeah, well, we wanted to have something better than a 10-round rifle sort of thing. Mind you, the rifle we had was just excellent. But we wanted something that was more rapid fire, where you had a choice of semi-automatic and just single rounds. So the Grand and the carbine. I had a 45 for close in. If anybody's on the wire, close in, you could use your carbine or your pistol or 36 grenade sort of thing. You had a variety. And I always kept my own personal weapon. It's just immaculate every day sort of thing, and because you inspect your troops every day to make damn sure that they don't get lazy and say, it's okay, and something like this. So you have weapons inspections every day, ammunition, foot inspections to make sure that guys weren't getting trench foot, and changing their socks off and so on. So you had all these things, but I left all that out sort of thing because we could be here for weeks, me talking, about little bits and pieces. But anyway, getting back to our living now, we were living in bunkers in the ground where you had your fire trench, and right out at one end of your fire trench, you dug something about 6 foot by about 6 foot square sort of thing, and you dug it down, and and you left inside. You dug it down a certain depth and then stopped, and then left like a shelf there to sleep on, and then you went to the edge of where you would sleep, and then dug down another 2 feet where you'd sit on your bed and your feet would be down in the slot, you see, where you would come in from out of your slit trench into, and your bed's right there, and at one end you had a little stove, and so on. So anyway, let me see here. I had a 45, I think. It was coming the spring of the year. You see, as my memory's kind of fading. And in the roof of our bunkers, you had layers of logs, any planks you could find. They were rare, of course, but you had to go to old villages that had been bombed to bits, and you went through and you tried to salvage anything you could, galvanized metal and stuff, because you also had the monsoon rains there, so you wanted to make sure that you had a roof that didn't leak, because your worldly possessions are inside that bunker. And so anyway, you put logs in, boards in there, a poncho, you threw in a poncho there to keep for dirt from falling between the logs down onto you, keep out rain and so on, and you made it about a foot or more. You tried to keep it high, and you put grass and everything else on top, and boulders, anything that would deflect shrapnel and stuff like that. So anyway, you had creatures get in there. We had snakes and rats. You could hear the rats at night because a lot of the food cans that when you're in a slit trench, you're not being neat and tidy. You open your can of spaghetti and you kept your eyes front and you were eating your spaghetti. When you're finished the can, you threw it over the front of the bank in front of you, sort of thing. Well, the rats at night, you could hear them going in the cans there. They were tinkling and that. You knew the rats were around. But you also did not know whether it was Chinese that were around. So anyway, but it was Chinese. Very likely they would pick the can up and set it down and you wouldn't hear them. But periodically we found them that way. And we used to hook up cans with tripwires with gravel in them. If anybody moved it, it would rattle the can, and we knew that there was somebody out there. because it gets as black as, you know, when you go out in the country right now, or in that room, for example, right there. You go in there, you can't see like you can in here, sort of thing. So at night, you can imagine there, it's jet black. Now add that to storm clouds and monsoon rains, and that's a good time to patrol, because you can move, and if you make noise, people won't know so much, eh? So anyway, this year, one morning I come out of my bunker. For some reason, I had to go to platoon headquarters for something. Anyway, I finished giving orders to a chap about something or other, and I stepped out of the slit trench, and there was this here bloody snake on the path. He had just come out of the roof of my bunker. He was about 4 or a little better feet long, and about the size of a salami, sort of thing. Maybe not quite as big as salami, but around that size. He was a big fella. Anyway, I grabbed my .45 and I put 2 rounds in him, sort of thing, but I didn't hit him straight on. What when my bullets hit him was taking chunks out of the side of his body. Well, anyway, he seen a hole at the side of the path, and he went down the hole. And so I put a big rock over that hole and hoped he went down there and had a terrible death. And anyway, in the roof we had rats. I might as well mention this right now. Rats carried a flea, and that flea would get in your blankets, because the rats would come down and get in your blankets, you see, when you weren't in there, and because they like warmth too. So anyway, and of course there's bits of food where you're sitting there and you've got crumbs and so on. So anyway, these rats, if they bite you, we called it the Manchurian fever because we didn't know what to call it. They, bacteria from the bite, it was the kiss of death. When they bite you, it took about 24 hours incubation sort of thing in your system, where your veins, you got tired, very tired, weak, and you could hardly put one foot ahead of the other. Anyway, and of course you finally collapse. And this one signaler, medic I should say, he was coming by my bunker, and I said, and I knew him, he's from Winnipeg, and I said, geez, you sure look terrible. I said, what's the story? You flu or what? He said, I don't know what the hell it is. He said, I can hardly put one foot ahead of the other. I said, sit down on the edge of the bunker. I said, I'll crack a quart of Asahi beer, and you can tell me all about it. And he didn't even belong to my platoon. He was with another platoon with A Company. So anyway, we had a mug of beer, a cup of beer apiece. And he said, geez, he said, I gotta go. He said, this is my 3rd night I've been out on patrol. And he said, my ass is just dragging. And he said, I gotta go over and lay down and get some sleep. Well, I understand that day, or evening I should say, because I spoke to him early in the morning. He'd just come in from patrol. The medics shipped him off to Seoul to the hospital, and he died there. The veins in your arm, they expand, and eventually they rupture and you drown in your own blood, sort of thing, in your lungs. It's a terrible thing. Anyway, that's what happened to that young fellow. And there was a number of other people. But the rats get up in the roof of your bunker, and every day I made the fellows bring their blankets out and shake them out, and when possible, to get on the back side of your hill and string out signal wire between trees and hang them out in the sun. And take a branch and beat them and stuff like that before you put them back in there. Trying to save your life, you see. So anyway, that's what little things that we did. And for heat during the winter, when you're up there near the Yalu, it's it could go below zero, and it gets very, very cold, and all you got is your gray coat, 3 blankets. So we used to hook up ammunition boxes with, put a layer of sand in the bottom. When I say an ammunition box, like a 30 caliber or 50 caliber, a metal box, preferably with a lid. And then you scouted around and got yourself some tubing and a jerry can. And always the jerry can would be up high and off to one side of your bunker out near your roof, of course, which is a terrible thing, because if artillery were traveling over something, you're in big trouble. But anyway, you turn it on its side, and as you know, in a jerry can, it's got a hole in the lid where you fill it. And you would jam your plastic hosing. They'd get this from MIRs and places like that, you know, and engineers. They get it from the American. They trade beer for the Americans and get all kinds of stuff that we didn't have. So guys are ingenious, and they get that way when you're in action, eh? And anyway, and they would hook this hose up and take the lid off, of course, and push it through and try to secure it on the inside with tape and anything else to try and keep it as tight as you, watertight as you can, or gas tight as you can. So anyway, the gas flows down the pipe. Anyway, so you take a piece of wire now, and about a foot back from your ammunition box, and you double the wire around your hose and take a pair of pliers, and you snug it down. You just keep twisting and twisting and twisting till you suck that hose right down, and without cutting it. You've got to put tape and everything else on it, and you could get a drop of gas at a time falling into the sand. And once you got the drip system started, then you could regulate it by squeezing your wire that you had put on the hose, either opening up or tightening to get the flow just right. The sand, of course, would suck up the fuel, and of course, you didn't light it just now. You let it get kind of saturated, and then you turned on the system, and you watched it drip it into the sand, and that's how it got saturated in the first place. And if it were just dropping out one little itty-bitty bit at a time, that was it. Now you could light the sand in the bottom of the box, and you had a nice woof at first, and then the blue flame, and it would just burn nice and even, sort of thing. But some guys got terribly burnt too, sort of thing. You know, they come back, maybe they had a one too many sort of thing, and step on the hose, and terrible. So anyway, that was our drip system, and it kept us warm at 30 below, and but it was mean. So they trying to keep warm, and when you're on sentry duty, you can't be jumping and flopping around, you know. So it was very difficult to try and keep your hand and your feet. So we had rubber bottoms, leather top boots. Okay, usually you can see them in stores even to this day. The bottom part is just a rubber boot with a leather top on it, laced up. So those were issued to us in lieu of ammunition boot. So anyway, that's what we did for heat and how we lived in the ground, and we slept in there, and we did all right, sort of thing. But you always had to be cautious of what was up above you, sort of thing, rats and so on and so forth. So, but anyway, we got through it okay, and it wasn't too bad a life. And anyway,
did you ever have like someone try to signal, like a South Korean or someone you didn't know from inside your lines?
oh yes, we did. We had rice burners, as we called them. These Koreans are short, stocky men, and of course they're born and live in the mountains, so they had thighs and calves on their legs like football players, and they can hunky down on the ground, squat like you see it, and they have an A-frame in their back, and that's exactly what it is. It's made out of 2 pieces of wood, and a spreader bar at the top to keep the two pieces of vertical sticks apart, and you had one at the bottom. And then out of the bottom of the two vertical sticks, you had pegs coming out that you could set a board on, and then you could set water can, gas can, ammunition boxes, stuff like that. And this was all held together with the stalks of rice. Once they harvest the top of the rice, just like you would grain.
So we were talking about the porters carrying different things. You'd call them rice burners. So could you continue with that description?
Yeah. Once a day they would bring up a hot meal, and that was at lunchtime. And sometimes it would be evening for one company, but noon another company, sort of thing. So anyway, this year, one day up in A Company here, what you did, you take a section at a time. Oh, I got ahead of myself here. What they brought up was hay boxes, big square metal boxes from the kitchen with hot food in them, and hot coffee, hot tea, stew, soup, potatoes, carrots, whatever was going that day was brought up in these here hay boxes that were made of, I think it was aluminum, the outer, but the inner part was stainless steel that carried the actual food. So when you got it, it was warm, sort of thing. Anyway, the rice burners picked it up at the bottom of the hill, and they walked the paths up to where we were, and by our platoon headquarters, of course, there was a flat area there, and they would pull the liners out of the hay boxes and set them on the hay box. Now you had a platform to set your various containers on. And you filed by, and somebody would be there to put in a scoop of potatoes, a piece of meat, whatever, you were served in your mess tin. And so you took one section at a time. Once you got your section through, you went back into your slit trench and ate it. Well, the two section would go through, and then when three would go through, and then platoon headquarters last. So anyway, my section had, how did that go now? My section was just getting all their food. We were just getting to the end of the last guy when there was an awful lot of commotion up back at behind us where the lines were. See, you're on the other side. The fighting side of the hill is here. Platoon headquarters is on this side, okay? So anyway, they got back, and there was Dutchy McConnell. He had caught a rice burner who, when nobody was watching, slithered back into the position we had vacated to get our lunch. And he had a piece of glass, and he was doing this business across the main supply lines to his cohort on the other side. Well, Dutchy kicked him, knocked him down the hill, and there was a lot of commotion going. And then he grabbed his rifle to kill him, you see, and then all of a sudden, one of the NCOs said, no, hold it. So they grabbed him and secured him and brought him back to platoon headquarters. And then he was marched down to company headquarters, and the company commander, Captain Swick, got a hold of the Korean police. You don't mess with them. There's no rules or regulations with them, and they understood English. And he said this man here was caught with this glass here signaling the Chinguk. He just they grabbed him, took him down to the bottom of the hill, shot him, threw him in the back of the Jeep, and took him away.
Did most of the Canadians witness that? Did people see that actually happen?
No, we weren't allowed down there.
Yeah.
Well, no, you got to get back in your business. That's Korean business now. You let them take care of what? You see, you get back in your slit trench and watch what you do, because obviously this guy was giving your positions away. He was giving them important information, sort of thing. How many people were there, the whole thing. you don't know how much he got away before Dutchy caught him. But anyway, that was it on catching, and I imagine there was lots of it go on that was not caught, sort of thing. But anyway, that was that one, and that's about all I can tell you on that particular one.
No, and that's good. So Harry, we're going to stop here because you've done tremendous service. You're a real trooper, and you've done I don't know what we're getting into, at least an hour and a half, and we were planning on an hour, and I know there's more we want to ask you about. You know, when you found out about going home, and then how you got home, and maybe how you received it home. But I think we're going to do a part 2. So, but at this time, I want to thank you on behalf of the museum, because we always do this, for both your service and also for your great contribution, because I just want to compliment you so much. You say that you didn't have a very strong education. Well, I got to tell you, anybody watching this tape will go, this guy's got a great education, because everything he says is correct and appropriate, and it sounds like you're a highly educated gentleman. So congratulations, and thank you very much. And I'm looking forward really to part 2.
Okay, I'll be all ready for it.